Good morning, my friends. Thank you very much for being here. I'm going to read right now from the Break the Cycle, the lesson 1.23. Convert excessive shame into healthy pride, confidence, and self love. Okay? So, skipping the first 5 paragraphs. Don't forget to follow the instruction that he means and to be acquainted with the previous lessons is very important. Okay? I want to say that I have been reading this for the last this is my third or fourth time that I'm reading this, okay? So I already know the website almost by heart and point out what it means. And actually, because I'm into other subjects like chakras and other authors, I can connect the dots. So go if you really want to be healthy and vibrate at a higher frequency. Take your time, okay? Slow and steady wins the race. Okay, so shame one-on-one. Understanding shame prepares you to convert it into healthy pride and non-egotistical self-love. And I would add compassion. Let's explore these questions. Where does shame come from? What happens to early shame as we grow up? What does shame become excessive? How does excessive shame relate to excessive guilt, humiliation, and embarrassment, pride and humility, submission and assertion, communication effectiveness, addictions, toxic compulsions, and addiction recovery, and psychological wound reduction? What's the opposite of excessive shame? And finally, what's the common symptoms of excessive shame? Option: pause, reflect, and try answering this and each of these questions out loud, as though to an average preteen. They compare your answers to what follows. Where does shame come from? Before we infants evolve a vocabulary and learn to think, we often experience powerful good me, bad me, senses or feelings. This came from decoding our caregivers' voice tones, facial expressions, and behaviors, and tranquility or stress in our environment. Repeatedly experience caregiver smiles, friendly faces, loving eye contact, tenderness, soothing, gentle touching, and voice sounds, and relaxed breastfeeding build a core security and good me feelings. Chronic absence of those experiences in infants promotes anxiety and a primal bad me attitude. This can happen when the primary caregiver, usually female, is overwhelmed or psychologically wounded and unable to bond. It may also happen if an infant wasn't mutually wanted conception. Inadequate or toxic nurturing promotes the early formation of one or more young personality subselves who believe and feel intensely. I'm bad, not okay. If we perceive more bad you than good you, signals from our primary caregivers, if they are inconsistent, gives mixed message. Their bad me feelings often grow. This is root of shame, of low self-esteem. And another source of shame can be life scripts installed by early caregivers repeat, you never amount to much. Pride is a sin, and you will always be a loser, failure, bum, etc. Statements like this are accepted by naive innate children who can retain and believe them well into adult life. When you finish this article, see these ideas on assessing for and correcting toxic life scripts and another way of permanently converting shame with self-love. Inadequate or toxic nurturing can include emotionally unavailable and or physically absent parents, caregivers frequently ignoring us, lack of genuine affirmation and verbal physical affection, and caregivers often name-calling, swearing, juring, belittling, degrading, scorning, and being sarcastic. Caregivers giving you disgust me look, lack of friendly eye contact, and rough or painful physical contact. Caregivers not teaching the difference between doing wrong and being wrong. Bad. Caregivers allowing other people to hurt, use, humiliate us. Inadequate wealth care, stimulation, and nutrition. Caregivers using us to satisfy their own needs without caring or understanding how they affect us. Abuse. If other people around us, young kids, seldom listen to what they are trying to say. If they're if they interrupt or laugh at us or trying to express ourselves, we are apt to learn I'm not worth listening to. If our main adults want to do the reverse of these things and leveling feel our early development needs nurture, well, our young sub-selves come to feel I am good, lovable, okay, worthy over time. This is a primary source of self-respect, self-trust, confidence, and self-love. Notice that this causes focus on the infant toddler phase on the early childhood. Other factors can ingrain and amplify early shame as we grow through adolescence. If our caregivers don't guard us from them, what happens to early shame as we grow? As we develop our knowledge and vocabulary, our evolving personality sub-self generate constant inner voices or thought streams. Most all of us who were neglected and shamed too often in our early years automatically develop an inner voice which are called inner critic or mean parent or shamer. When our original shamers, for example parents, aren't around, our well-intentioned inner critic diligently carries on their work. He or she fills our mind with harsh criticisms and comments like, your socks don't match. You are so stupid. Well, I'm wearing right now socks that don't match and I don't give a damn. I do not care. I've already explained on a previous video what I did. When I was 8, I already was born with my third eye open, okay? And I had access to the monadic conscience, which means that you ask a question and the universe gives you an answer. So these things many of the things that I'm learning right now I already knew by then, because I just asked the questions and I had conversations with my higher self that already knows the answers. Much more much faster than I have now, okay? Right now, what I do is I search for the answers in 3D to back up what I say, okay? Because you can't go to another person. Well, my higher self tells me that you can't do that. So what I did was that with 8 years old, I made a plan to leave my parents and my country, and I live abroad. I was born in Lisbon, in Portugal, and I live abroad in Germany for almost 20 years. So what I did is that I learned new languages, so that the mother tongue, your mother tongue is always the language that's going to affect you most, because it's more connected to your emotional. So when you speak another language, you are more intellectual, so you don't get affected. Okay, and another thing that I did, and that's the reason why I don't have voices. I didn't speak for my parents for 8 years. So there is a biofield expert. I will do a video about her, and she says that our parents are here, and their voices are here, and I don't have them anymore. So I don't call them, and I know that I'm being harsh and rude, but for my mental health, and because they are so low nurturings that I cannot be with them. I am sorry, it hurts, it is weird, especially coming from a Catholic background, but to tell them they are not good enough and how they behave is not good enough, and they don't have the ability to realize that they don't have love to give, and I have to be like the Queen of Swords, you know. That's not good enough for me. You have to amputate it, and that's it. Okay, and it has been a multi-decade process. Okay, as I slow and steady. Okay, yes, and yes. So I like to see into my past and see how much I've progressed, and it fills my heart with joy. Okay. Some young kids also evolve a judgmental preacher or moralizer sub-self. It ceaselessly argumentates the critic by pronouncing rigid right or wrong, good bad judgments about us and other people. These tireless sub-selves are nourished the impressionable guilt child in us. They mean well, just as the shaming, blaming, wounded, overwhelmed caregivers and their ancestors did. Shame has been called weirdly the gift that goes on giving, because shame-based wooden parents often unintentionally pass it on to their kids. Overly shamed kids and adults can feel ashamed of their shame and other wounds. How does shame relate to guilt? Shame is the feeling that the belief I am bad, unworthy, and unlovable. Guilt is the emotional response to feeling I broke someone's rule. I should not, must not, cannot, ought not, have not. Usually, guilt amplifies shame. I broke the rule, so I'm bad. The psychological wounds of excessive shame and guilt are very similar, but they have different roots and merited healing recovery strategies. How does shame relate to humiliation and embarrassment? Shameful thoughts and feelings have a private experience. We feel embarrassed or humiliated when our shameful traits and behaviors are exposed publicly, especially to people whose opinions matter to us. Our critical subselves can embarrass us, and or other people may ridicule and humiliate us publicly if we are not clear of our own personal identity and rights. This is very important. Um, an universal shame gauntlet kids must navigate it mercilessness and criticism of middle school and high school classmates and some adults, especially as puberty and early sexuality lends angst and exciting confusion to our journey towards adulthood. Bottom line, during childhood and puberty, our infantile bad me feelings become the shame child subself. He or she is continually influenced by our well-intentioned, inaccredited, perfectionist, and preacher subselves and certain people. When does normal, healthy shame become excessive? All emotions range from faint to extreme. For example, unease to panic and annoyance, irritation to rage. Moderate, normal shame and is helpful. It helps us to adjust our attitudes and behaviors to avoid significant discomforts. For example, feeling I am ashamed and guilty because I am often late to school or work can motivate learning why and how to be prompt. When normal shame is balanced by a steady positive self perception, not seriously degrade to our self-respect or relationships or cause too many of the symptoms on page 2. Note that you can feel global self-respect, I am a good person, and still feel local shame and guilt about one or more social roles, responsibilities, for example. But I am ashamed and guilt and that I'm not better parent, sibling, neighbor, spouse, Baptist, citizen, bus driver, pianist, tennis player, speaker. Well-intentioned guardians, subselves, will try to distort reality to protect against the pain of admitting excessive shame. If your resident true self is free to guide your other subselves, he or she will admit shame without undue guilt or self-scorn, and B, evolve an effective plan to reduce it and other significant psychological wounds over time. That's what I'm doing with the videos and the channel, especially to share my experience and my how am I doing, okay? And I think the main key is to learn how to forgive yourself and to forgive others. And that's something that I didn't learn in my family. I'm learning it right here with myself, okay? How does excessive shame relate to pride and humility? Were you taught that pride is a sin and or sign of self-centeredness, a swelled head, or egotism? Typical shame-based survivors of childhood neglect are often taught shaming beliefs like this. Premise: healthy pride is a feeling of non-egotistical approval, respect, admiration, and appreciation for a person's or group's traits, talents, goals, and achievements. Excessive pride, I am, we are, they are, better than others, is called egotism, elitism, racism, prejudice, and or bigotry. These always foster hurt, resentment, antagonism, conflict, anxiety, distress, and low nurturance relationships and families. Humility is minimizing your personal traits, talents, assets, status, and achievements. If it can range from healthy, I see me or us as being equal dignity and worth of the other persons, to toxic. I am, we are inferior to other persons' groups and we don't merit special praise or rewards. Humility can be genuine or pretended, to moderate to excessive, when denied and or justified. It's God's commandment. Excessive humility promotes self-abuse and self-neglect, excessive personal and or group shame and guilt, and psychological wounds in minor kids. What are you taught about being humble as a child? What are you teaching your kids about it? Don't brag. See this perspective on pervasive Christian values on excessive humility and the sins of personal pride, superiority. Recall, we are exploring aspects of the common psychological wound of excessive shame. How does excessive shame relate to submission and assertion? That's the male and the feminine energy. Submission is the feminine energy, and assertion is the male energy. Okay. Sometimes submitting, giving in to others' needs, values, and opinions promotes social harmony and cooperation. Compulsive submission suggests significant psychological bullying. Typical survivals of low nurturing childhood often unconsciously feel inferior, so they don't deserve or expect social respect, fairness, or equal consideration with others' needs and opinions. Assertion is the vital relationship skill of knowing how and when to declare your needs, opinions, and limits. As kids, average grown nurtured children are taught to respect their own rights, values, and needs as much as other people's, to assert them with confidence. Typical wounded children, GWCs, are not taught this and may submit or assert with ambivalence, guilt, timidity, and anxiety. They grow used to enduring the uncomfortable results of sending chronic "I am down" inferior messages to other people, and I'm not feeling their needs. Intentionally empowering your true self and reducing excessive shame and guilt over time causes genuine self-respect, promoting yourself to equal, a calm, firm, respectful assertions. How does excessive shame relate to addictions? Premise: any true addiction, toxic compulsion, is a sure sign of low nutrients, dysfunctional birth family, a sign of significant personal inner pain and inherited psychological wounds, and a strategy by protective guardian subselves to reduce that pain despite toxic results. True addictions always promote local relief and relentlessly increase the inner pain, shame, guilt, remorse, anxiety that promotes them. Self-destructive pain, addiction, more pain, spiral continues until the person dies prematurely or hits true bottom and commits true addiction recovery. For example, to finding another way to reduce their inner pain, stable addiction recovery, sobriety, is required for effective psychological healing. When you finish here, see these articles from more perspective on addictions and sobriety. Well, basically, and summarizing means that the less light you have in your body, the more sick you're going to become. Okay. I did a previous. There is a little video from Robert Speer. He's quoting a physicist called Albert Popp. He's a German physicist, and he explains technologically how does the photon affects the electron and communicates everything. So we are beings of light. It's energy. Okay, we are light beings, and the more light we have, the more love we have. Okay, and this is already proven. The less love you have, so the less light you have, with more dark traits, the more pain you're gonna have, and you're gonna die sooner. Okay, you pay your stupidity with your own life. That's the rule of it. Or your narcissism, or codependence, or the inability to change. Okay, or to align your thoughts, feelings, emotions, and actions. Okay. How does excessive shame relate to psychological wound reduction? Premise: growing up in a low nurturing childhood family promotes up to 6 significant psychological wounds. That is shame, guilt, fear, reality distortions, anxiety. Okay, the inability to grieve. Okay, to say I'm sorry or to forgive yourself. Okay, one wound is excessive shame. Lesson 1 is this non-profit website focuses on identifying and reducing these wounds. This article promotes how to convert excessive shame to normal and increase self-respect and self-love. Most people who hit true bottom and commit to personal wound reduction recovery will have to break long-held protective denials to admit and reduce excessive shame and guilt. These wounds are usually caused by a powerful reactive shame child, guilt child, perhaps other inner kids, and their tireless, narrowly focused guardian subselves. An inner child core belief is that I am not good, I'm not worthy or lovable, can block the other subself seeking wound recovery and or sabotage their efforts to empower the wise resident true self to lead. This is especially likely when fearful, distrustful subselves to perceive wound recovery unneeded, unsafe, hopeless, and or too hard. Establishing a trusting relationship between the true self and resident shame child and similar subselves takes the great patience, sensitivity, and compassion to accomplish. This is the most likely if the recovering person intentionally chooses to support a network of people led by their true selves. What is the opposite of excessive shame? It's a non-egoistic pride, self-love, self-respect, and self-nurturing versus self-neglect. These come from key attitudes steadily held by your governing sub-selves in the most of all situations and relationships. A key attitude in some version of this is I am a good, valued, useful, lovable child, adult person, no matter what anyone else says or implies. I have talents to develop and non-shameful limitations which empower me to bring unique value and worth to other living things and to the world. How can you tell if someone like you has inherited psychological wounds of excessive shame? Typical symptoms of excessive shame are there are many signs, all caused by the shamed child, critic, perfectionist, and preacher personality subselves. The more of these traits a person has, the more likely he or she is a shame-based, grown wooden child, a GWC. See if you recognize any of these symptoms. They are not prioritized. Options A. After rating yourself, ask someone who knows you well to rate you honestly on each of these traits. B. Use this trait list to track your healing process over time. Having a rigid core belief I am bad, weak, unlovable, undeserving, inept, unattractive, stupid, powerless, worthless, person, man, woman, partner, parent, child. 2. Being excessive zealous, defending rigid, dogmatic, and or preachy about sin, moral righteousness, good, the evil, the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, hell, the one true religion, and about being damned or saved. 3. Habitual self-centeredness and significant egotism. Having one or more active, that's number 4. Having one or more addictive addictions to substances, including fat, sugar, and some carbohydrates. Activities, for example, work, spending, gambling, pornography, and working out. Certain relationships, codependence and or emotional states, excitement, rage, spiritual ecstasy, or sexual arousal and release. 5. Constant belittling, discounting, and criticizing yourself and others. 6. Repeatedly choosing menial jobs below personal capabilities, avoiding responsibilities excessively. A compulsion to rescue needy or disadvantaged others, championing and identifying with other dogs. 8. Having few or no real friends and or being consistently drawn to people and recovering good and needy companions and partners. 9. Excessive social isolation or a compulsion to socialize can be charming and the center of attention. 10. Excessive sensitivity and defensiveness to perceive criticism or rejection. 11. Habitually avoiding eye contact and being apologetic or discerning about them. 12. Often misperceiving natural feedback as criticism and or wrongly assuming unspoken criticism. Excessive concern with personal and on social fault finding. 14. Feeling irrationally guilty and or actions about earned success, the imposter syndrome. 15. Obsessing about my rights and I don't deserve or equally nor fairness. 16. Endlessly focusing on the past mistakes and privately. 17. Habitually putting your own options, needs, and welfare last versus equal. 18. Having an unreasonable fear of failing, losing, or making mistakes. 19. Never admitting mistakes or compulsively apologizes all the time. More common symptoms of excessive shame. 20. Habitually unflattering, inappropriate, and sloppy clothing, grooming, and or hygiene. 21. Obsessive concern with personal, professional, social vehicle, and or dwelling appearances. 22. Compulsive perfectionist, I can't help it, and a driven need to win and or to be the best or to be the number one. 23. Compulsively shading the truth or lying directly or by omission, and denying it to avoid expected ridicule, criticism, or disapproval. Also a symptom of excessive fear. 24. Notable self-neglect, for example, resisting or avoiding appropriate medical care, rarely or never seeing a doctor, dentist, gynecologist, eye specialist for checkups or illness, not getting and taking prescribed medications, poor personal hygiene. 25. Choosing unhealthy diets, habits, for example, smoking, lack of experience and or toxic environments, and ignoring, neglecting, minimizing, explaining, analyzing, or joking about it. 26. Rarely buying anything nice or special for oneself or taking fun trips or vacations. 27. Deflecting, discounting, and or rejecting deserved compliments and being very hard on myself. 28. Chronically giving time and energy to others and getting little or nothing in return. 29. Avoiding self-assessment for psychological wounds and or true personal recovery. 30. Repeatedly choosing, justifying, and tolerating relationships, situations, and or environments which promote major shame. 31. Being unable to do self-love exercise. 32. Repeatedly taking risks that result in self-harm, humiliation, and or loss of self and social respect. Denying or justifying an active addiction is a common example. 33. We're rarely requesting or demanding what one wants, or doing so anxiously and expecting rejection rather than asserting calmly, being timid, passive, quiet, reserved, or aggressive, self-centered, and or bullying. 34. Not setting or enforcing holistic healthy limits, boundaries with oneself and others. 35. Tolerating and unjustifying a core belief like I don't deserve, expect, love, success, love, security, comfort, friends, or nice things. 36. Self-sabotage, repeatedly setting oneself up for failure, disappointment, frustration, and or losses, and feeling or saying I can't help it, it doesn't matter, I don't care, I deserve it. 37. Frequently choosing long-suffering victim, saint, or martyr roles in key relationship and social settings, and not questioning why. 38. Choosing a direct contact human service profession, for example, clergy, counseling, medicine, education, law enforcement, consulting, coaching, training, driving public vehicles, customer service, casework. Yes, there are exceptions. The more these shame traits someone has, the higher the odds they are predominantly shamed by an inner child, an inner critic, a perfectionist, and perhaps a moralizer, preacher, sub-self. So, what can you do of this crippling psychological wound? Typical shame conversion options. In this video provides options for improving self-respect. The video mentions 8 self-improvement lessons in this website. I've reduced that to 7. Converting excessive shame to guilt-free self-respect and self-love is part of a larger process, harmonizing all your personality sub-selves under the leadership of your wise true self and other manager sub-selves. Read this whole section before following any other line links. It outlines internal part works, healing options, and external social options for converting shame and healthy pride. Internal part work options. 1. Read online lesson 1 and assess yourself for inherited psychological wounds. Commit to long-term personal healing recovery. 2. Identify your personal sub-self and learn how to do part works. 3. Use your version of this part work strategy to raise your self-esteem. 4. When you are undistracted, read and integrate these ideas on increasing self-confidence and self-love. 5. You are raising your children and these ideas about protecting them against early shame. These ideas apply to your inner children too. Pause, read, and notice what you are aware now. We are just reviewed key steps in converting internally caused shame, low self-esteem into healthy pride and self-love. Let's look at how to block external social sources of shame. The mistaken belief that I am bad and unlovable comes from some early childhood adults and some personal sub-selves and critical and disapproving people and perhaps a shame-based religion and church. This section offers a specific way to calmly block the last two of these sources. Note that we will focus on people who promote significant guilt in another article. For perspective, think of one or more people or groups in your life who shame, scorn, discount, disrespect you openly and covertly. Meditate on how you usually react: silence, seething, and resentment. Apologies, whining, anger, hostility, excuses, avoidance, numbing out, crying, complaining, collapsing, name-calling, self-criticism, and disgust, addiction, and depression. The best thing is that if your boundaries are not respected, you move on. Okay, you just if their frequency are too low to be with you, you can just move on. Okay, every response like this is a psychological dimension to you. The shamer and your relationships. They usually come from unawareness, a disabled true self, ignorance and of communication skills and options. All of 3 of these can be corrected. Read this whole section before following any underlying links. Select from these options the best fit for your situation. Numbering continues from above. 6. Essential. Work steadily to harmonize your team of sub-selves under the wise leadership of your true self, other managers, and higher power. Lesson 1. As part of this process, patiently follow options 1 to 9 above. Most other self-help advisors omit this requisite. As you relate to other people, use this self-aware exercise to notice significant feelings of shame and disrespect. Identify the specific behaviors that cause these feelings, for example, sneering, interrupting, criticizing, disparaging, name-calling, guilt-tripping, manipulating, eye-rolling, labeling, that's a stupid idea, humiliating, dictating, controlling, and on physical intrusion, aggression, and or abuse. Look for patterns over time. Each such behavior will cause you, shamed child, to spasm, and you'll probably activate your critical, perfectionist, preacher, and pessimist subselves. 8. Take this quiz about interpersonal communication knowledge. If you can't answer most items, invest time in studying online lesson 2 at the following link. Otherwise, select from these options. 9. Study this example, Bill of Personal Rights, and then draw your own. Knowing and believing your own rights and dignify a person in the basis of effective assertion. 10. Protect your integrity. Define the core values by which you want to live your life, like honesty, compassion, tolerance, forgiveness, self-nurturance, and respect your body, spirit, and the environment. Living by these values consciously promotes healthy and self-respect. Ignoring these values, violating your integrity, promotes shame and guilt. 11. Pick a person who tends to shame you. Identify A. Specifically how they behave that shames and disrespects you, and B. how you feel when they do. For example, irritated, hurt, resentful, demeaning actions, guilty, frustrated, angry, weary, etc. Each feeling comes from an activated personality sub-self like your shamed child. 12. When you are centered, composed, a 3-part I message that you will give your shamer. Ideally, in person after they disrespect you, use these examples as guides. Role play your session out loud until you are comfortable with it. If any sub-selves are nervous or opposite to this, remind your rights as a dignified, worthy person. 13. Imagine specifically how this person is likely to respond to your I message. For example, scoring, anger, changing the subject, sarcasm, silence, complaining, blaming, etc. Compose an empathetic listening statement that objectively summarize their response and practice it out loud. Recall these are options for reducing social external sources of shame. 14. The next time the person shames you, use your I message and empathetic listening. 17 and 18. As often as you need, until you feel hurt. If your preacher gets anxious, remind the guardian that the indicates that your self-esteem and integrity are more important than being liked. 15. If the person psychologically wounded the GWC, choose from these relationship options, then apply any one including maid, parents, and other kids. If the person isn't respecting your boundaries, consider these options. If the person, there are links, if the person is a child, reviewing these communication suggestions. Use this framework with each person who shames you. The more you use it, the more habitual and reflexive it will become. Each time you assert your feelings, values, needs, and boundaries, honor your integrity. Notice that happens to you, to your self-respect and pride. 19. Evaluate whether your religions and spiritual beliefs and practices may promote significant shame, guilt, and or fears. If they do, help your sub-selves find and adopt a more nourishing faith. See this succinct review of Power of Positive Self-Esteem by Dr. Nathalie Brandon. I also recommend John's Bradshaw practical book, Healing the Shame That Blinds You. 21. As you evolve, your version of these healing options keep working patiently and reconverting internal shame into self-love. Options 1 to 10. Use the symptoms checklist above to track your progress over time. Keep your perspective, converting excessive shame in an important part of freeing your true self and reducing all your inherent psychological wounds over time. 23. If you know other people bordering by excessive shame, consider referring them to online lesson 1 and on this article. The overarching goal here is to alert people on lethal moods and unawareness cycle and motivate them to break it. Pause, breathe, and reflect. What are you aware of now? Are you significantly burdened by excessive and chronic low self-esteem, shame? If so, how motivated are you to use the options above, exchange your shame for guilt-free self-respect and self-love? If you have inner voices, thoughts that say, this won't work, this is too hard, I will never be able to do these options, know that short-sighted false selves are trying to guard you from scaring change and disappointment. Don't give in to them. Your shame critic depends on yourself to release them for lifelong burden and undeserved shame. Recap. This article is one of the series in Lesson 1 on healing 6 common psychological wounds inherited by typical survivors of childhood abandonment, neglect, and abuse trauma. This article offers a perspective on the crippling wound excessive shame, low self-esteem, shame one-on-one, how excessive shame relates to guilt, pride, self-respect, humility, egotism, embarrassment, assertiveness, addiction, and wound recovery, a checklist of typical behavior symptoms of excessive shame, and a 28 practical suggestions how to permanently shift excessive shame towards a non-egotistical self-love, pride, and self-love. Recall, this is one of several wound assessment checklists in Lesson 1. Pause, breathe, and reflect. Why did you read this article? Did you get what you needed? If not, what do you need? Who's answering these questions? Your true self or someone else? Thank you very much for listening to me. Comment, like, subscribe. Share with me, please, your experiences. We can learn a lot together. For questions and donations, there is the email below. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Bye.